Intense spin, every single thing they talk about all has this kind of gestalt to it, that this is a threat.
And it very well could be a threat.
It's a threat to our national security. It's a threat to our airspace. It's a threat to our sovereignty. It's what it is. It's a threat to our dominion over our own planet. And of course, they think that's their job. Our job is to assert full spectrum dominance over the entire planet. We actually have the documents from the 1992 United States Defense Department Policy Planning Guidance document, where they said that right at the dissolution of the Soviet Union, said, oh, we've got to not cut back on our military spending, we have to increase it so we can establish full spectrum dominance over the planet. And so you know what their agenda is, the national security state. It's not for the defense of our sovereignty. Not this.
Even the Air Force Office of Special Investigations officer, Richard Doty, admitted that he would bring bags of cash to national security editors in the major media to get their cooperation in this narrative.
So every news agency, every television, radio station in the Albuquerque or Santa Fe area had our snitches in there. So we knew, and we paid them. We paid them good money. One of the reasons you get the people is you pay them, and that was controversial. That was somewhat controversial.
Do you know of national media that have had?
Oh yes, yeah. I'm not going to name them.
What you have now is a concerted effort between mainstream media, social media platforms, and tech giants to say, let's gain control back of the narratives that we require to make sure that we can control how people think about certain topics. So now you have this fear-driven, you have this tight little box of what the UFO and the extraterrestrial subject is really about, how it relates to military, government spending, weapons, all the sort of conversations that are very common in the mainstream that people are going to relate to, that they, oh, okay, I can piece the typical dots together.
Let me give you a great example. If you look at a lot of the Disclosure Project materials, which is beyond the scope of this film, we identified dozens of people who were at intercontinental ballistic missile, nuclear silos, nuclear weapons areas, who had UFOs come in to those areas, surveilling them, but in some cases rendering those missiles unlaunchable. Now, most of the men that were in those silos have said to me personally, they felt that these ETs were saying, please don't blow up this beautiful planet. But if you do, if you go to mutual assured destruction, the full launch of nuclear weapons globally, we can intercept a lot of them so that you don't go to a full extinction level event. They felt that it was actually a very hopeful thing that happened. Meanwhile, people came along, took the same data, the same cases, and spun it into a national security threat. One set of facts, two narratives, diametrically opposed.
My first cases coming out of law school was for NBC to establish the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources. I did the amicus briefs for the New York Times and the Washington Post and also for CBS and ABC. And it was at that time that I began to realize that there was this close working relationship between the board of editors of the New York Times and the national security community. That there's conversations going on all the time between the board of editors and the national security people. And we actually got an affidavit from Teddy Sorensen saying that, oh yes, the national security state, the CIA, and everybody consult regularly with the New York Times to get them not to tell information about covert operations that we're engaged in. I was surprised to find that out at that point. I began to do an investigation about this as the lawyer for the Times now and for NBC, and found out that there were 42 full-time Central Intelligence Agency or NSA people employed by the major national news media. And they had an entire project called Project Mockingbird. And that they were deeply embedded with the major national news media, and they were constantly, from their point of view, safeguarding the information that was going to be allowed to get out. And it was quite clear that they viewed themselves as all part of the same basic fraternity. They all shared in the patriotic vision of the Central Intelligence Agency being able to go around the world. The thing we had the biggest challenge with on the Pentagon Papers case is they didn't want to reveal the fact that there was a massive assassination program going on, and it was being funded by heroin trafficking. to keep it away from the congressional funding investigations, et cetera. I thought this was a terribly newsworthy thing to tell about, but it was beyond the pale. That was not to be talked about here. You can talk about how bad the Vietnam War was, and even the fact that they lied about the Bay of Tonkin incident, but not the
singularity phasing within all beings. Dr. Erwin Schrödinger, Nobel Prize-winning physicist.
I'll tell a really funny story. In '92, the head of Army intelligence and a few of his minions intercepted me and took me to a hotel room, very threatening. There was a National Security Agency person there, CIA people. They were saying, "What the hell do you think you're doing? Teaching people to bypass our systems and contact these civilizations." I said, "I don't recognize your authority over this matter." And then I looked them in the eyes and I said, "I'm not afraid of you because I died when I was 17 and I know there is no death. I don't care about your money, and I've had direct contact with these civilizations, so you can't deceive me about who they are and why they're here." And the general just sat back like this and went, "We know exactly who this son of a bitch is." And I said, "Yes, so this is what we're going to do." It was very frustrating for them, but later, a member of one of the European royal families, who I don't want to name, who was involved with that crowd, came up to me and she said, "They're very jealous of what you and your team are doing." I said, "Jealous of what? These are the most powerful people." And he says, "No, they know that you guys actually collectively have all the power. And they wish they could do what you're doing, but they're in the box of this national security state program that they cannot escape from, and you're free. You're a free agent. You're free to do wonderful things, and they're not, and they're really jealous of what you guys are doing." It was a real insight into the sad psychology of the people who are in this pinched, small world. So I say to the public, you should be happy that you're not part of all of that. You have the freedom to do things they can never do. So let's do it.
There is a deep relationship between collective consciousness and the physical world.
Sociology studies of meditators, where they go into a community, say you have a town of 200,000 people, and they would send in 1% of the population equivalent, 2,000 people, to go into deep meditation. And they found that emergency room visits declined, violent crimes declined, robberies, all kinds of negative behaviors declined, even though those people didn't even know they were in the city, because there is this resonant effect through the force, if you want to look at it that way, through this entangled, interwoven consciousness field. And people who didn't even know these meditators were there became more ordered, more peaceful, more happy, etc., and so on.
This was actually based on the studies done in quantum physics, in which a container of helium was cooled down to absolute zero. When only 1% of the helium became aligned to coherent, the entire container went through a phase transition, instantly shifting into coherence and taking on almost magical properties, a state called superfluidity.
So there was this transformation at that 1% point. When a critical mass of people, and whether it's 1% or a fraction of that, depends on the state of consciousness of those who are practicing the meditation or a prayer or coherence. But at that point, you can shift an entire civilization. If we all become coherent, just 1% of us, like a molecule of helium, and we become aligned and coherent and move in the right direction, it will transform the other 99%, even though they don't know that we're doing it. And that's the beauty and the power of the structure of non-locality in consciousness, is that it's all interwoven, but there's enormous power when you're operating at that deeper level of consciousness. And that the intelligence community is very much afraid of, because that's something, A, they cannot control, and B, it would transcend their ability to alter the outcome.
State called heart-mind coherence. The human heart contains 40,000 neurons that can sense, feel, learn, and remember. You can bring your mind and heart into this coherent state and have more access to intuitive knowing by consciously focusing on positive emotions during your meditation.
These beings they respond to our thought. They respond to our thought, so they will not be invasive. And if you're feeling like you want to continue whatever contact experience that is happening, but there may be a bit of residual fear that you're trying to work through, tell them. Say, look, I'd love to carry on doing this, but I feel a bit scared right now. Can you help me with that, you know? And they will.
And that's the other evidence. I know they're not hostile. We've been all over the world, thousands of hours, with thousands of people, have had all manner of contact at a distance, intimately, beings, ET beings appearing in our rooms, all kinds of things. No one has ever been harmed. No one has ever been harmed at all. This isn't an official document on the FBI website, sort of hidden in plain sight. But it really confirms everything that we're explaining, but also the experience we've had. And this isn't from 1947, so this is 72 years old. He goes through and describes that they are peaceful people, they traverse these dimensions, that they have these abilities in consciousness. He even relates to some of the Vedic terms of the kind of capabilities witnessed from these beings.
All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particles of the atom to vibration. I must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Max Planck, founder of quantum theory.
Even though what I'm doing with CE5 is what I'm most ridiculed for, it was the project that got the most respect and attention from the intelligence community because they knew it was real. They knew the science of consciousness is real. They knew that these ET civilizations utilize communication technologies that interface with thought and telepathy and consciousness. On this beach. This being highly intelligent, an extraterrestrial civilization at the level of the celestial. So it visualized humanity evolving to the point that everyone on Earth were in cosmic consciousness and enlightenment. That's what we're talking about. 500,000 to 1 billion years ahead of us. Get a load of this. We're in a deep meditation I'm leading. We're in cosmic consciousness. This is a Peruvian doctor, medical doctor. I call it the cosmic spermatozoa. It looks, and it comes in and it wraps around her and she begins to have the Kundalini and an enlightenment experience like she's never had. And of course this happens a lot on these expeditions, but we got it on photograph. Isn't that cool? I love this one. It's just off the edge of the hill and you see people turning to look. And it was this object that materialized into this dimension and lit up and then dematerialized. What I saw in my remote view was a very large craft filled with ETs from different civilizations that were joining us in the meditation. Because that's what they're interested in. They're interested if you have a pure heart, a clear intent, and you're wanting to join them in universal peace. That's it. They don't care about your degrees, they don't care about
He couldn't believe it either. He went and got his camera and took a short video clip of this red orb.
He said that for the next 45 minutes he had a communication with them, and at the end of the conversation he said, "Do you think you can do something about my hearing?"
Got some sleep, and when I woke up, I went out to breakfast with some of the people in the group. I had hearing aids and they weren't with me at breakfast, and it was a very emotional event for me to discover that I could hear everything everyone was saying at the table, and not only at my table but at tables away from me. And I haven't worn my hearing aids since. I had a hard time finding them to bring them here. They do a very good job, but not as good as the ETs did. It's changed my life, you know, it really has. And that's the part that gets me.
I didn't know this happened to him until I saw him the next day on the hammock. And he was just relating the story, and he was crying like a baby. And just to watch the emotion coming out of him was very moving, and he's had perfect hearing since then.
My takeaway from the event and from my experience with the ETs is that they've been in my life a long time, and I just didn't know it. It's such a beautiful world waiting for us.
encounters with, say, an angel or something, but they're not. They're not from, they're ETs with star systems and planets and bodies, but their level of consciousness would be at the level of, say, the highest spiritual realm. There's a precise correlation to the kind of technology that you will observe and the level of consciousness that civilization has attained. Let's take our own civilization. We're mostly still separate people, and we're operating through a reductionist separate paradigm. We're also still very violent and destructive. So let's look at our technologies. Oil, we're burning something and destroying the air. Nuclear power, we're splitting and tearing apart an atom to create heat, to turn a turbine, to create electricity. Coal, we're digging stuff up and destroying mountains and then burning this stuff in a fiery furnace. It's all very destructive. And so our technologies are a corollary to our inner state of consciousness.
In 1964, Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev proposed a hypothetical scale of measuring a civilization's level of technological advancement based on the amount of energy they're able to utilize. A level 1 civilization, also called a planetary civilization, can use and store all the energy available on its planet.
At that point, their main focus becomes the development of higher states of consciousness. Because they have all the technologies to meet everyone's needs, there's no shortage. Their economic system is non-economic in the sense that there's an infinite abundance for everyone because of these technologies that can materialize things out of the substrate of space-time, the elementals of space-time. So at that point, a civilization becomes really focused on the development of higher states of consciousness. And as they evolve in consciousness, their technologies evolve with them. They will begin to then unfurl the mysteries of consciousness and the cities I mentioned earlier in the Vedas, but those get applied technologically, which include levitation, teleportation, dematerialization, bilocation, where the same object can be instantly resonantly created and be in two places at once. We've had this happen on our team.
As water by cooling and condensation becomes ice, so thought by condensation assumes physical form. Everything in the universe is thought in material form. Paramahansa Yogananda.
The steps of this are that you sit in quiet consciousness, and you don't have to have a full-on samadhi or whatever, but just in quiet consciousness, connect to that aspect of your mind that is unbounded, and then intend to sense, feel, see, know where the ET craft is. It could be in another galaxy. Connect to those beings, politely invite them to come and visit you, and then you connect to their communication systems and their consciousness, which are integrated, and you show them where you are. So you kind of zoom in. It's almost like a vectoring, zooming in from wherever they are to where you are. Let's say if you're in North Carolina, you're coming into Earth, you're coming into North America, the East Coast, the mountains, the Blue Ridge, zoom down to a few square meters around where you are, where you clearly show them where you are. And you do this in a coherent thought sequence that is continuous.
I got it.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
How?
It's very easy to do once you practice it for a while. The key thing is to first take about half an hour to meditate, go into quiet mind, then sense where they are, and then invite them. Well, people say, well, you're calling them. I say, well, no, it's not like that. You're actually making contact and consciousness and thought before they arrive in their craft or transdimensionally around you. And when the ETs approach us most profoundly is when everyone in the team is in a coherent state of consciousness and are clearly doing this with the intent. Because we're dealing with non-human life forms. Now we have to transcend even humanism and our common humanity into this idea that there has to be something more universal within us that's also within these extraterrestrial civilizations that bind us together. And luckily there is. It's this field of consciousness that is cosmic and universal. And that's what's inside everyone. It doesn't matter if it's a homeless person on the street or an MIT professor. If they are conscious and awake, the entirety of the cosmos is folded within them like a conscious quantum hologram, because consciousness isn't limited by space and time. People say, where do I have to go? Well, first you have to go within yourself, but you have to understand what yourself is. And there's your individual ego and self, but there's this deeper aspect of ourselves that is simultaneously interwoven. And when we go deep in meditation and connect to that, then we have reached the point that we can be an ambassador to the universe, because we have become universal.
In our time, this search for extraterrestrial life will eventually change our laws, our religions, our philosophies, our arts, our recreations, as well as our sciences. Space, the mirror, waits for life to come look for itself there. Ray Bradbury.